Hello and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here and welcome back to my studio. Today I'm starting off my painting session by loosening up using just one colour to paint this monochrome landscape here. It's an impressionistic scene from my imagination and the sort of exercise that I like to do when I first get into the studio, and it sort of warms me up and gets me ready to paint. My favourite paint to use for this one colour exercise is Cotman Payne's Grey. It's a student quality paint, but it's absolutely fantastic in that it splits out through all sort of different tones of grey through to almost black, but it splits out to bring out beautiful blues when you use lots of water, and I really like the effects that it gives. It also works really well with salt. You can see the salt effects that I'll be showing you how to create in the foreground, along with etched marks that I've put into the damp paint using a palette knife. I'm using Saunders Waterford cold pressed watercolour paper. It's taped to my board and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees. I don't pre-stretch my paper. It will buckle a bit as I paint, but then it will flatten out as I leave it to dry naturally. I'm going to use the wet in wet method for this spontaneous painting, so I'm going to wet the sky and the land, leaving a few dry patches. And the reason for this is, of course, paint and water will only flow where the paper is wet. It will resist where the paper is dry. So where the paper is dry, I'll get some harder edges. Where it's wet, I will get lovely soft diffusions. I'll also be looking for a good variety of tonal value and a good variety of textures, and by looking for all of these things in this painting, I'm sort of warming up, getting myself into the painting session, ready for a full day of painting in the studio. So I'll just start applying paint to paper using my 1.5 inch Watercolor brush, starting off by suggesting a tree line, and then I shall paint in some land, sort of a snowy field, and then some undergrowth across the foreground, weeds and plants just growing up like a sort of a hedge across the bottom left corner. A 3/4 inch flat brush and horizontal brush strokes has given me some nice flat snowy landscape between the foreground and the distant trees, and now a graduated wash and horizontal brush strokes with the large Watercolor wash brush will give me my sky. And I used the Watercolor brush to create the something and nothing foreground, and finished it off with the fan brush, which has just pulled up some texture and just started to build up all the sort of brambles and weeds and frosty undergrowth in the foreground. Just adding a little bit more tone here and there where I think it needs it, while the paper's still wet, because everything will just softly diffuse and give me the kind of effects that I'm looking for. Scraping through the rich paint with a palette knife will then give me some tree trunks and branches, and using the palette knife across the front will continue to build up the texture in my foreground. The palette knife is really good for scratching through the rich paint that I've put in the foreground. The paint is starting to dry now, so I'm not getting as strong a marks as I could do, and I like the marks that I'm getting, and that area is just about ready to add some salt. So I'll just scrape a few marks into the landscape, the plane of land itself, just to add a bit of texture and variety and a bit of perspective. So now that I've got the painting this far, I'm going to flatten the board and have it completely flat because I don't want the washes running any further. And here's my ordinary fine ground table salt. I will sprinkle it into the damp paint in the foreground, and each little grain will push aside the paint and give me some really pretty marks. Please be aware that using salt in your paintings probably isn't archival. So if you're planning on keeping a painting for more than sort of 50 to 100 years, then I suggest you don't use salt. But if, like me, you're just playing around, practicing, experimenting and having a lot of fun, it can make some wonderful, wonderful effects. So that's most of the painting done. I'm going to leave it to dry completely and then come back and finish the painting wet onto the dry painting. So here's the dry painting, and I've raised the board back up to about 20 degrees. And continuing just with the one colour, a few finishing touches now. I'm just going to add some tree trunks and branches with Payne's Grey using the rigger brush, just to sort of reinforce and work around the marks that I scraped through the paint. So we'll have darker tree trunks amongst the lighter ones, and then once I've got the shapes right, then I'll pull the trunks down of a couple of the trees down a little bit further into the midground so that they stand out a bit more and create a focal point. So I'm happy with that now. I'm just going to remove the tape and, as always, enjoy having a look at it with its clean white border. As I paint over the tape, it makes quite a difference when I remove the tape, and it looks sort of almost as if it was framed or mounted. And I'm quite pleased with this. It's warmed me up nicely. I've enjoyed playing with the paint and had a lot of fun trying to sort of balance out the tones and get the trees looking nice. And I'm quite happy with the way that just bringing those trunks down a little bit further into the midground of those sort of main trees has created a nice focal point. And if we look closely, you can see the pretty effects that we've got by sprinkling salt into the rich, damp paint. If your paint is too wet, then it'll just dissolve the salt and make a bit of a mess. If it's too dry, it won't work. So it's good to learn how to sort of find that sweet spot where you get those pretty little blooms, if you like that effect. If not, then you can just paint in flowers, sort of by dotting in flowers with sort of calligraphic brushwork and things like that. Well, I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoyed watching me in the studio again as I sort of warm up and practice my values and my washes with one colour Payne's Grey. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone that supports the channel on Patreon. We couldn't run the channel without you, and we really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Take care and have a lovely weekend.